The
All right,
rain
listen
came
up.
down like
They
bullets on
want a
the
war,
Arizona
they
desert
got
that
one.
November
We hit
night.
them hard, we hit them
Inside the
fast.
Iron Horse
Who's
bar,
with me?
shattered glass covered the
Get
floor
off
like
me!
diamonds scattered across hell. The neon Budweiser sign flickered,
Stay down!
casting red shadows across three
No!
figures huddled behind the oak bar counter.
Hey there.
Hey
Marcus
there.
Steele
Hey.
Garrison
Hey
pressed his back
there.
against the wood,
Thank
his
God.
Colt 45 steady in his right hand, despite the blood running down his left arm. 58 years old, 220 pounds of muscle and scar tissue, president of the Phoenix chapter of the Hells Angels for a decade. He'd survived Desert Storm, survived 35 years of the outlaw life, survived losing the only woman he'd ever loved. Tonight, he might not survive at all. But that wasn't what scared him. What scared him was the elderly woman trembling beside him, her silver hair disheveled, her hands clutching her daughter's shoulders with a grip that spoke of maternal ferocity older than civilization itself. Loretta Wilson, 65 years old, a widow who'd answered his classified ad for a cook 6 months ago and somehow ended up meaning more to him than he'd ever admit. And her daughter, Magnolia. Everyone called her Maggie. 28, scared but defiant, her arms wrapped around her own daughter, sleeping fitfully in her lap. Little Clementine, 5 years old, still believing in superheroes. "Boss!" The shout came from Flint Wrench Maddox, Marcus's vice president, crouched behind an overturned table near the door. "They got the whole block locked down." Another burst of gunfire. Wood splintered. Bottles exploded behind the bar, whiskey and beer mixing with broken glass and blood. Marcus turned to Loretta. Her eyes met his. 65 years of living had taught her to read men, and what she saw in Marcus's face made her straighten her spine. "Nobody touches them," Marcus said, his voice gravel in certainty. "Nobody." Outside, someone shouted his name. The voice belonged to Cage Thornton, brother of the Outlaws' MC president, currently sitting in a federal holding cell. Ex-mercenary, 17 confirmed kills in Mexico. A man who'd broken out of El Paso maximum security just to make this moment happen. "Garrison, send out the women. This ends clean." Marcus's jaw clenched. His finger tightened on the trigger. Loretta placed her hand over his. Gentle, the way she'd touched his shoulder 100 times over 6 months when she'd found him staring at nothing, lost in memories of Margaret. "We fight," she whispered. Those two words, simple, absolute. Marcus looked at this woman who'd walked into his life with nothing but pride and desperation, and a talent for cooking that had somehow reminded him what it meant to be human again. "Yeah," he said, "we fight." 6 months earlier. Dawn broke over Red Canyon Ranch the way it always did. Harsh, unforgiving, beautiful in that way the Arizona desert specialized in. All red rock and endless sky, and heat that hadn't quite started building yet, but promised to punish anything foolish enough to still be breathing come noon. Marcus Garrison woke at 5 in the morning because his body didn't know how to do anything else. 33 years since Desert Storm, and some habits were carved into bone deeper than any tattoo. He sat on the edge of his bed in the ranch house he'd bought with Margaret back in 1995. 29 years they'd planned to grow old here. 29 years that got cut short to 26 when the cancer took her in 2021. 3 years, 1,095 days of waking up alone. Marcus stood, 6'2" of weathered muscle and scarred history. The mirror showed him what he already knew. Gray in his beard, lines around his eyes, the scar on his left shoulder where Iraqi shrapnel had nearly ended him in 1991. The Marine Corps Eagle Globe anchor tattooed on his right bicep, faded but still recognizable. The Hells Angels' death's head on his left forearm, sharp as the day he'd earned it. He pulled on jeans, boots, his worn leather vest with the patches that told his whole story to anyone who knew how to read them. President patch, Hells Angels bottom rocker, veteran pins. MC culture was all about communication through symbols, and Marcus's symbol said, "I've survived things that would have killed you." But the symbol he touched most often was the one in his wallet, a photograph, creased and faded. Margaret, standing in this very kitchen, flour on her hands, laughing at something he'd said. The last photo he'd taken before the diagnosis. The kitchen where she'd stood was empty now. Had been for 3 years. Marcus made coffee, black, strong enough to strip paint. He drank it standing at the counter, looking out the window at 200 acres of high desert, half of it good for nothing but making a man feel small. His phone buzzed, text from Wrench. Church at 9, outlaws sniffing around again. Marcus typed back, be there. He dumped the rest of his coffee in the sink, checked the Colt, .45 he kept in the kitchen drawer, verified the magazine, chambered around, and slid it into the holster at his back. The Glock 19 went into an ankle holster. The knife, a K-bar from his Marine days, clipped inside his boot. A man made enemies in this life. A smart man stayed ready. The Phoenix Chapter Clubhouse sat on the eastern edge of the city, a squat concrete building that had been a tire shop once upon a time. Now it was painted black, reinforced with steel bars on the windows, and decorated with a 10-foot Hell's Angels emblem that could be seen from the highway. 23 motorcycles were parked out front when Marcus arrived. His 1998 Harley-Davidson Road King, cherry red with enough chrome to blind you in sunlight, took its place at the head of the line. President's privilege. Inside, the clubhouse smelled like motor oil, cigarettes, and brotherhood. 25 men, ranging in age from 28 to 67, representing every kind of working-class backbone America still possessed. Mechanics, electricians, construction workers, a few who'd been to war, all of them bound by the same code. Loyalty to the patch, loyalty to each other, and absolutely no cooperation with anyone who tried to make them compromise either one. They called it church. The weekly meeting where business got handled, votes got taken, and problems got solved the way problems had been solved since the first MC chapters formed after World War II. Marcus took his seat at the head of the table. Wrench sat to his right, a 52-year-old ex-Navy Seabee with hands like hammers and a mind for strategy that had saved their asses more than once. The others filled in around the scarred wooden table, and when Marcus rapped his knuckles twice against the wood, every conversation stopped. Outlaws, Marcus said. One word, enough. Every man in the room knew what it meant. The Outlaws Motorcycle Club, one of the big 4 outlaw clubs in America, had been encroaching on Hell's Angels territory for 6 months, testing boundaries, pushing buttons, looking for weaknesses. Last week they'd found Marcus. Decker Thornton came by the ranch, Marcus continued, offered partnership in a gun-running operation. Military hardware, stolen from National Guard armories, sold to militia groups and anyone else with cash. Silence. Then Wrench spoke, his voice careful. What'd you tell him? I told him we run bars, garages, and security. We protect our neighborhoods. We don't touch dirty money, and we don't move illegal weapons. One of the younger members, a kid named Jesse, spoke up. Boss, outlaws don't take no for an answer. Marcus's eyes, pale blue and cold as winter sky, settled on Jesse. The kid was 28, eager, and didn't understand yet that some lines couldn't be uncrossed. Then they're going to learn, Marcus said. Wrench cleared his throat. Boss, we need to talk about your situation. Marcus tensed. What situation? You've been living on pizza and canned soup for 3 years. Half the guys have seen your fridge. It's pathetic. Laughter rippled around the table. Marcus scowled. I eat fine. You eat like a man who's given up, Wrench said, and the laughter died. Margaret wouldn't have wanted that. The name hung in the air. Margaret. Nobody had spoken it aloud in Marcus's presence for months. He could have shut it down with a look, and everyone knew it. Instead, he was silent. Wrench pressed on, gentler now. Patty O'Brien from your neighborhood called me, said she's worried about you, said you need someone to cook, Someone to make sure you're actually living instead of just breathing. Marcus stood abruptly. Church dismissed. The men filed out, but Wrench stayed. Boss, I don't need help. Margaret would have kicked your ass for this. Marcus turned, and for a moment, Wrench saw past the armor, saw the grief, saw the loneliness that came from losing your partner and not knowing how to exist without them. She would have, Marcus admitted quietly. Let Patty help. She knows someone, good woman, needs work. Marcus looked at his friend for a long moment, then nodded once. Just once. Loretta Wilson stood in front of the bathroom mirror in her trailer and wondered when, exactly, she'd gotten old. 65, hair gone silver, hands wrinkled from 6 decades of work, face lined with the kind of marks that came from raising children, burying a husband, and surviving in a country that didn't value women who'd given their best years to thankless labor. But her eyes were still sharp, her back was still straight, and when she needed to be, Loretta Wilson could still be formidable. She needed to be formidable today. Mama, you sure about this? Maggie stood in the doorway, her daughter Clementine on her hip. 28 years old, beautiful in that fragile way women got when life had beaten them down, but they were still standing out of sheer stubbornness. We're 3 weeks from eviction, Loretta said. $2,400 in back rent. Your shifts at the grocery store cover food, barely. I'm working 2 jobs and it's not enough. But Mama, you saw what Google said. Marcus Garrison is the president of the Hells Angels. I also saw $800 a week plus housing. Loretta turned to face her daughter. Maggie, I cooked for the Army for 7 years. I fed 300 soldiers at a time. I can handle 1 biker. Maggie's eyes filled with tears. What if he's like Dalton? Loretta's expression hardened. Dalton Reed, Maggie's ex-husband, currently serving 5 years in state prison for assault and trafficking. A man who'd introduced them both to what evil looked like up close. Then I'll know within 5 minutes, Loretta said, and we'll leave. She picked up the flyers she'd found at the post office, handwritten in neat block letters. Cook needed. $800 per week plus housing. Call for interview. Below it, a phone number and an address. Red Canyon Ranch, Marcus Garrison. Loretta had called. A man's voice, rough as sandpaper, had answered on the 3rd ring. Yeah? I'm calling about the cook position. Silence. Then, you can cook? 40 years experience. Come by tomorrow, 3 o'clock. We'll see. Click. Loretta had stared at her phone. Not exactly warm, but honest, direct. She could work with direct. Now, standing in her cramped trailer bathroom, with her daughter and granddaughter watching her, Loretta straightened her shoulders and made a decision that would change all their lives. Get Clem ready, she said. We're going. Red Canyon Ranch sat 30 miles outside Phoenix, accessed by a dirt road that wound through scrub brush and red rock formations that looked like God had started carving sculptures and gotten distracted. The ranch house was old but well-maintained, single-story, painted white with a deep porch. Behind it, Loretta could see outbuildings, a large garage, and a smaller cottage. 3 Harley-Davidsons were parked near the garage. A black pickup truck sat in the circular driveway. Everything was clean, organized, purposeful. Maggie gripped the steering wheel of their 20-year-old Honda Civic. Mama, I'm scared. Me too, baby. That's why we're brave. They parked. Loretta smoothed her dress, a simple blue cotton thing that had seen better days, but was clean and pressed. Maggie wore jeans and a blouse, her dark hair pulled back, her hands trembling slightly. Clementine, oblivious to the tension, pointed at the motorcycles. Mama, look! Big bikes! The front door opened before they reached the porch. Marcus Garrison stepped out, and Loretta understood immediately why grown men followed him. He was huge. Not in a soft way, but in the way of men who'd built their strength through decades of hard work and harder living. His leather vest hung open over a black t-shirt that showed arms covered in tattoos and scars. His beard was gray, his eyes were cold, and his face was the kind that had forgotten how to smile. But he wasn't looking at Loretta with cruelty, just assessment. The way a wolf might watch something approaching its territory, wary, ready. "Mrs. Wilson?" His voice matched his appearance, gravel and whiskey. "Yes, sir, this is my daughter Magnolia and my granddaughter Clementine." Marcus's eyes moved to Maggie, then to the little girl. Something flickered in his expression. Gone so fast, Loretta almost missed it. But she was 65 years old, and she'd raised 2 children and buried a husband. She knew grief when she saw it. "Come in." The house was clean but empty. Not empty of furniture, but empty of life. Like a museum of someone else's existence. Photos on the wall showed a younger Marcus in marine dress blues. A woman with kind eyes standing beside him in a wedding photo. The same woman, older, laughing in a kitchen. No recent photos. Nothing that suggested anyone actually lived here now. Marcus led them to the kitchen. It was large, well-equipped, and clearly hadn't been used for anything beyond reheating pizza in years. He turned, crossed his arms, and asked the question Loretta had been dreading. "Why do you want to work for me?" Loretta met his eyes, held them. "Because I need money. Because my daughter and granddaughter are 3 weeks from being homeless. Because I cook better than anyone you've ever met. And you need someone to feed you before you forget what real food tastes like." Marcus's eyebrow raised slightly. "You know who I am. I know you're Marcus Garrison. I know you're president of the Hells Angels Phoenix chapter. I know you served in the Marines during Desert Storm. And I know that you haven't had a decent meal since your wife died 3 years ago." The temperature in the room dropped about 10 degrees. Maggie inhaled sharply. But Loretta didn't flinch. Marcus stared at her. Really stared. Looking for something. Finally he spoke. "Cook me dinner. Now. If it's good, you've got the job." Loretta surveyed the kitchen like a general surveying a battlefield. The refrigerator held beer, expired bacon, and eggs of questionable age. The freezer had ice and nothing else. But the pantry revealed possibilities. Flour, potatoes, onions, canned tomatoes, dried herbs that were probably older than Clementine, but might still have some life in them. Maggie stood uncertainly. "Mama, what can I do?" "Watch Clem, and stay out of my way." Loretta worked, 65 years old, but her hands remembered every lesson the Army had taught her. Every recipe she'd perfected feeding school children for 3 decades. Every trick she'd learned keeping a family fed on poverty wages. She made shepherd's pie. Ground beef she found in the freezer, browned with onions and tomatoes, seasoned with those ancient herbs brought back to life with a little heat and faith. Mashed potatoes, real ones, whipped with butter and milk she sent Maggie to buy from the corner store 5 miles down the road. A crust on top that came out golden and perfect. She made bread, simple, fast, the kind that didn't need time to rise because time was a luxury she didn't have. Just flour and baking powder and buttermilk, rolled out and cut and baked until the kitchen filled with the smell of home. She made coffee, strong and black, the way military men liked it, the way men who carried weight preferred it. 45 minutes after she'd started, Loretta set a plate in front of Marcus Garrison and waited. He looked at the food, picked up his fork, cut through the golden crust, through the layers of meat and vegetables and potatoes, lifted the first bite to his mouth, and stopped. His eyes closed. Just for a moment. When they opened, they weren't quite as cold. "Margaret used to make this," he said quietly. Loretta's heart clenched. "Your wife?" Marcus nodded. He took another bite, then another. Ate methodically, the way soldiers did, the way men who'd known hunger respected food. When the plate was empty, he looked up. "You and your daughter can move into the cottage behind the main house. Starts Monday. $800 a week, cash. Housing is free. You cook 3 meals a day when I'm here, stock the fridge, keep the kitchen clean. You don't ask questions about my business. I don't ask about yours. Fair?" Loretta's voice came out steady, despite the relief flooding through her. "Fair." Marcus stood, pulled out his wallet, handed her $800 bills. First week, get your things. Wrench will help you move tomorrow. Mr. Garrison, Marcus, just Marcus. Marcus, Loretta corrected. Thank you. He looked uncomfortable with gratitude, nodded once. Thank you for the meal. Been a long time since anyone cooked in that kitchen. As Loretta, Maggie, and Clementine prepared to leave, Marcus walked them to their car. Clementine, fearless in the way only 5-year-olds could be, looked up at this massive, scarred man and smiled. "You're really big," she said. Marcus's lips twitched, almost a smile. Almost. "Yeah, I am. Do you have any little girls?" The question landed like a punch. Marcus's face went carefully blank. "No." "That's sad. Little girls are nice." "Clem!" Maggie pulled her daughter toward the car, mortified. But Marcus crouched down, bringing himself to Clementine's level. Up close, Loretta could see the scars. The one on his temple, the one that split his left eyebrow, the smaller ones that marked his knuckles from a lifetime of fighting. "You're right," he said to Clementine. "Little girls are nice. You take care of your mama and grandma, okay?" "Okay." Marcus stood as they got in the car, watched them drive away. Loretta glanced in the rearview mirror. Marcus Garrison stood in his driveway, alone, a man surrounded by 200 acres of emptiness. "Mama," Maggie said softly, "I think he's the saddest man I've ever seen." Loretta thought about the empty house, the unused kitchen, the photos of a woman who'd loved him and left him alone in the worst possible way. "Yeah, baby," she said, "I think you're right." They were halfway back to the trailer park when the black SUV appeared behind them. Maggie noticed it first. "Mama, that truck's been following us since we left the ranch." Loretta checked the mirror. Sure enough, a massive black Escalade, windows tinted darker than legal, keeping pace 3 car lengths back. Might be nothing. Might be Dalton's friends. The name sent ice through Loretta's veins. Dalton Reed, Maggie's ex-husband, currently serving 5 years for assault and weapons trafficking. But Dalton had connections. Dalton had debts. And Dalton had friends who didn't forget. "Stay calm," Loretta said. The Escalade accelerated, pulled alongside them at a red light. The passenger window rolled down. 2 men, both white, both in their 30s, both wearing the kind of casual violence that came from years of hurting people for money. The passenger had a snake tattooed on his neck. The driver wore a leather vest with patches Loretta recognized from Maggie's stories about Dalton. "Outlaws, MC." "Magnolia Reed," the passenger shouted. "We need to talk about what your husband owes." Maggie's hands tightened on the wheel. "My name is Wilson now, and Dalton's in prison." "But his debt ain't. $50,000, sweetheart. With interest, that's 70 now." The light changed. Maggie gunned the engine. The Honda's 4 cylinders screamed in protest, but they pulled ahead. The Escalade followed. Easy, predatory. Loretta pulled out her phone, dialed the number Marcus had given her. He answered on the first ring. "Yeah? This is Loretta Wilson. We're being followed by 2 men in a black Escalade. They're threatening my daughter about money her ex-husband owes." Marcus's voice changed, went from neutral to lethal in 1 syllable. "Where are you?" "Route 89, heading south, about 20 miles from your ranch." "License plate?" Loretta read it off. "Pull over at the Chevron station in 3 miles. Go inside. Stay there." "Marcus, do it. Now." The call ended. Maggie's eyes were wide with fear. "Mama, what if they—" "Chevron station, 3 miles. We're going to be okay." They pulled into the gas station, hurried inside. The clerk, a Navajo man in his 50s, took one look at Loretta's face and nodded toward the back room. "Trouble?" "Maybe." "Coffee's fresh. Help yourself." The Escalade pulled in, parked blocking their Honda. The 2 men got out. Through the window, Loretta watched them approach the store. Watched the passenger adjust something at his waistband. A gun, probably. Then she heard it. the sound that would become familiar over the next 6 months. The deep, throaty roar of motorcycle engines. Multiple motorcycles. Coming fast. 6 Harley-Davidsons screamed into the parking lot, led by a cherry-red road king with a rider in a leather vest and silver beard. Marcus Garrison dismounted before his bike had fully stopped. Behind him, Wrench and 4 other Hells Angels spread out in a semicircle, cutting off any escape. The 2 outlaws froze. Marcus walked toward them with the kind of calm that only came from absolute certainty of violence. He stopped 3 feet away. "You boys lost?" The passenger tried to bluff. "This ain't your business, Garrison. You're harassing women under my protection. That makes it my business. They owe. I know what they supposedly owe. I know your president, Decker Thornton, sent you. And I know that you're standing in front of 6 very irritated men who would love an excuse to express their irritation." The driver spoke up, trying to salvage something. "Decker wants to talk. Tomorrow. Neutral ground." "Fine. Tell Decker I'll meet him at Old Road Bar. 8 p.m. Just him and me. No crew. He'll want answers about our offer." Marcus's smile was colder than his voice. "He'll get them." The 2 outlaws backed toward their Escalade, got in, drove away faster than they'd arrived. Marcus turned toward the gas station, made eye contact with Loretta through the window, gestured for her to come out. Loretta took Maggie's hand. They walked outside together. "They're gone," Marcus said, "but they'll be back." "This about your daughter's ex-husband?" Maggie's voice shook. "Dalton worked for the outlaws. He owed them $50,000 for guns he was supposed to move, but got arrested before the sale. They think I should pay his debt." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Pack your things tonight. Move into the cottage first thing tomorrow morning. I'll send Wrench and 2 prospects to help." "Marcus, we can't." "You can. You will. Those men know where you live. They'll come back. At my ranch, you're protected." Loretta found her voice. "Why are you doing this?" Marcus looked at her, really looked at her. And for just a moment, she saw past the armor, saw the man who'd lost his wife and didn't know how to be a person anymore, saw the soldier who'd taken an oath to protect and couldn't stop, even decades later. "Because I said, nobody touches you," Marcus said simply, "and I keep my word." He got back on his motorcycle. The other Hells Angels mounted up. Before starting his engine, Marcus called out, "Loretta, that shepherd's pie was good. Make it again when you're settled in." Then they were gone. 6 motorcycles disappearing into the desert sunset, leaving Loretta and Maggie standing in a gas station parking lot, holding each other, crying from relief and fear, and the strange kindness of a dangerous man. In the car, Clementine asked, "Grandma, is the big man our friend now?" Loretta thought about Marcus's cold eyes and colder promise. "Yeah, baby," she said. "I think maybe he is." Sunday morning, 6 a.m., Wrench pulled up to Loretta's trailer in a pickup truck with 2 younger Hells Angels, Jesse, the eager 28-year-old from church, and a prospect named Clay who looked about 19 and scared to breathe wrong. Loretta had everything packed. 3 years of living in a trailer meant you didn't accumulate much. Clothes, kitchen supplies, photos, and the quilt her grandmother had made in 1952. Everything she owned fit in the bed of the truck with room to spare. Maggie's belongings were even simpler. Her life with Dalton had taught her not to get attached to things. Things could be taken away. Things could be destroyed in a drunken rage. Better to travel light. Clementine's toys filled 2 cardboard boxes. Not much for a 5-year-old, but enough to make her smile. "That it?" Wrench asked, looking at the modest pile. "That's it," Loretta confirmed. He nodded, didn't comment on how little they had, didn't offer pity, just said, "Cottage is ready. Boss made sure it's clean. Fixed the plumbing yesterday." "Marcus did plumbing?" Wrench smiled. "Boss does everything. Learned in the Corps. Says a man should be able to fix anything that breaks on his property." They drove in convoy to Red Canyon Ranch. Loretta in her Honda, Wrench in the truck, Jesse and Clay following on their bikes. When they arrived, Marcus was waiting on the porch. He'd shaved, trimmed his beard, wore clean jeans and a black t-shirt that somehow looked formal on him, making an effort. Cottages around back, he said. 2 bedrooms, bathroom, small kitchen, living room. Not fancy, but it's solid. The cottage was more than Loretta had hoped for. Old but sturdy, built probably in the 50s when the ranch was first established. Wood floors worn smooth by decades of footsteps. Windows that actually closed properly. A bathroom with hot water and good pressure. And it was clean. Spotless, actually. Someone had scrubbed every surface, washed the windows, even put fresh sheets on the beds. "Who cleaned this?" Loretta asked. Marcus shrugged, uncomfortable. "Had some time yesterday." This massive, terrifying man had spent his Saturday afternoon cleaning a cottage for a widow and her family. Maggie started to cry, just stood in the middle of the living room and cried. All the fear, all the stress, all the years of Dalton's abuse and poverty and struggling to keep Clem fed and safe, it all came pouring out. Loretta held her daughter, let her cry. Marcus shifted awkwardly. Wrench and the prospects suddenly found reasons to be very interested in unloading boxes. Finally, Marcus spoke. "I'll be in the main house. Move in at your own pace. When you're settled, come over. I'll show you the kitchen." He left, gave them space. Wrench stayed long enough to help move the furniture, then followed Marcus. Jesse and Clay finished unloading, then disappeared on their motorcycles. And suddenly, Loretta and Maggie and Clementine were alone in their new home. Not a trailer, not temporary, an actual home, on land that stretched to the horizon, with a man who'd promised protection standing between them and the world. "Mama," Maggie whispered, "what if this is too good to be true?" Loretta looked around the cottage, looked out the window at the desert beyond, thought about Marcus's cold promise and the way he'd moved mountains to keep them safe. "Then we'll enjoy it while it lasts," she said, "and maybe, just maybe, we'll make it real." That evening, Loretta cooked her first official meal as Marcus Garrison's employee. She'd explored the main house kitchen that afternoon, found it fully stocked now, where yesterday it had been nearly empty. Marcus must have gone shopping, or sent someone. Either way, the refrigerator held fresh vegetables, good meat, real butter, milk, eggs. The pantry had been refilled with quality ingredients. He'd invested in this. In her. Loretta made pot roast, the kind that took hours, beef slow-cooked with carrots and potatoes and onions until it fell apart at the touch of a fork. She made fresh rolls, green beans with bacon, apple pie for dessert because the pantry had apples, and she had time, and she wanted to make a statement. At 6 p.m., she walked to the main house and knocked. Marcus opened the door, looked surprised to see her in a clean apron, flour on her hands. "Dinner's ready," she said, "if you want to eat." He followed her to the kitchen, stopped when he saw the table. She'd set it, 2 plates, real silverware, a glass of water at each setting. Nothing fancy, but intentional, purposeful. "You didn't have to," Marcus started. "Yes, I did. You hired me to cook." Cooking means more than just throwing food at someone. It means setting a table, means eating like a human being instead of an animal. Marcus looked at her, then at the table, then slowly he sat down. Loretta served him, placed the plate in front of him with care. Pot roast, vegetables, a roll still warm from the oven. She sat across from him with her own plate. Marcus picked up his fork, cut into the meat, took a bite, and closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were wet. "This is exactly how Margaret made it," he said, his voice rough. "Exactly." "Good recipes are universal," Loretta said gently. "Good food is a language everyone understands." They ate in silence, comfortable silence, the kind that came from 2 people who'd lived long enough to know that words weren't always necessary. When Marcus finished, he pushed his plate back and looked at Loretta with something approaching vulnerability. I haven't eaten like this in 3 years, he said. Haven't sat at this table. Haven't felt like a person. You are a person, Marcus. A good one, I think. Under all that armor. He shook his head. You don't know me. I know you cleaned a cottage for strangers. I know you faced down 2 armed men to protect my daughter. I know you're paying me $800 a week when you could probably get someone cheaper. She paused. I know you're lonely. I know you're grieving. And I know that's okay. Marcus stared at his empty plate. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. She died in our bedroom. I held her hand. She told me not to give up, not to stop living. He looked up and the pain in his eyes was raw. But I don't know how to live without her. Loretta reached across the table, put her hand over his. This dangerous, violent man who killed people with his bare hands and led a motorcycle club of outlaws. You learn, she said, one day at a time, one meal at a time. You remember that living honors her more than dying inside, and you let people help you. Marcus looked at their joined hands, didn't pull away. I'm not good at letting people help. I noticed, but I'm not good at taking no for an answer. So I guess we'll see who's more stubborn. That got almost a smile. Almost. They sat there in the fading light, 2 wounded people finding something like hope in a shared meal. Outside, the Arizona desert cooled down from the day's heat. Somewhere, Maggie was putting Clementine to bed in a cottage that finally felt safe. Somewhere, the outlaws were planning their next move. But in this kitchen, in this moment, 2 lonely people weren't quite so alone anymore. And that was enough. The first week passed like a dream Loretta was afraid to wake from. She rose at 5 every morning, same as Marcus. Found him already in the kitchen, coffee brewing, staring out the window at land that stretched beyond seeing. She'd pour 2 cups, hand him one without speaking, and they'd stand in companionable silence while the desert transformed from black to purple to gold. Then she'd cook, eggs and bacon, biscuits and gravy, pancakes with real maple syrup, food that stuck to ribs and reminded a man what it meant to be cared for. Marcus ate every bite, and though he rarely spoke during breakfast, his eyes said what his mouth couldn't. Thank you. I needed this. I forgot what home felt like. Maggie helped in the afternoons, learning Loretta's rhythms, staying quiet when Marcus was around. The man made her nervous, all that contained violence and careful politeness. But she noticed things. How he always checked the locks 3 times before bed. How his hand instinctively went to his waistband when an unexpected car approached. How he flinched, just slightly, when Clementine laughed too loud. A man living with ghosts. Clementine, innocent of adult complications, had decided Marcus was her friend. She'd wander to the main house after lunch, stand at the door until he noticed her, then pepper him with questions. Why are your motorcycles so loud? Makes them harder to ignore. Why do you have so many tattoos? Each one tells a story. Can I have a tattoo? Ask me when you're 30. Marcus answered every question with the same serious attention he'd given adult. Never dismissed her, never told her to go away. And slowly, imperceptibly, the hard lines around his eyes began to soften. On Thursday, Loretta found him in the garage, teaching Clementine the names of tools. Socket wrench, torque wrench, Allen key. The little girl repeated each word carefully, her small hand in his massive scarred one. You're good with her, Loretta said from the doorway. Marcus looked up, caught. She asks questions. I answer. Margaret wanted children? The question was bold. Loretta knew it. But sometimes boldness was the only way through. Marcus was quiet for a long time. Then, couldn't have them. Cancer took that possibility before we even knew we wanted it. By the time we decided to adopt, the diagnosis came. He looked at Clementine, who was now trying to pick up a wrench twice her size. Would have been a good mom. You would have been a good father. Maybe, we'll never know. But watching him guide Clementine's hands, showing her how to hold the tool properly, Loretta thought, You already are. Friday evening, Wrench and 4 other Hell's Angels came for dinner. Loretta had been warned, but the reality of 5 massive bikers crowding into Marcus's kitchen still took adjustment. They were polite, almost courtly, calling her ma'am and complimenting the food with genuine appreciation. The food was worth complimenting. Fried chicken, mashed potatoes, coleslaw, cornbread. Comfort food elevated to art. Boss, Wrench said around his third piece of chicken, you've been holding out on us. Why didn't you hire Mrs. Wilson 3 years ago? Wasn't ready, Marcus said simply. The men understood. They'd all seen him after Margaret died. The drinking, the fights, the slow retreat into himself. This dinner, this laughter, this almost normalcy was resurrection. Loretta watched the dynamics. Wrench, clearly second in command, intelligent behind the rough exterior. Jesse, young and eager to prove himself. Clay, the prospect, barely speaking, absorbing everything. 2 others, Hank and Bear, older men with military bearing and careful eyes. These weren't thugs, they were brothers, bound by something deeper than blood. After dinner, as the men lounged with coffee and pie, Jesse asked the question everyone had been dancing around. Boss, what about the outlaws? Decker's gonna want an answer. The temperature in the room changed, became focused, dangerous. Marcus set down his fork. Meetings tomorrow night. Old Road Bar. Just me and Decker. The hell you are, Wrench said flatly. You don't walk into that alone. I walk in with crew, he walks in with crew, and it becomes a war. I want to talk first. Boss, I made the call, it's done. Loretta felt ice in her stomach. She'd heard enough from Maggie to know what the outlaws were, what they did, and she'd seen enough of Marcus to know he'd walk into hell itself if he thought it was the right thing to do. After the men left, she cornered him in the kitchen. This meeting tomorrow, it's about Maggie's debt? Partially. What's the other part? Marcus looked at her with those cold blue eyes. They want me to move guns, military hardware. I said no. They don't like no. So you're meeting the man who threatened my daughter to tell him no again? That's about the size of it. Loretta wanted to scream, wanted to grab this stubborn, self-destructive man and shake him. Instead, she did something worse. She told him the truth. If you get yourself killed, who protects us? Marcus blinked, hadn't expected that angle. I won't get killed. You don't know that. You're walking into a meeting with men who make money from violence, men who want something from you, men who've already shown they'll threaten women and children. Her voice broke. Marcus, we just got here. We just started feeling safe. Don't take that away. He stood there, this massive man who'd survived war and prison and 3 decades of outlaw life, looking lost. What do you want me to do? He asked quietly. Take backup, be smart, come home. I always come home. Margaret probably thought that too, right up until the day you didn't. It was a low blow. Loretta knew it, but she was 65 years old, and she'd already buried one man she cared about. She wasn't ready to bury another. Marcus's jaw clenched. For a moment, she thought he might yell. Instead, he nodded once. I'll take Wrench. He can stay outside, in case. Thank you. That night, Loretta couldn't sleep. She lay in her bed in the cottage, listening to the desert silence, and prayed to a God she hadn't spoken to in years. Keep him safe. Please, we need him. Saturday arrived with the weight of prophecy. Marcus spent the day preparing, cleaned his guns, checked his bike, made phone calls in a voice too low for Loretta to hear. He was planning, calculating, getting ready for every possibility. At 4 p.m., he came to the main house kitchen where Loretta was prepping dinner. I need to tell you something, he said, about your daughter's ex-husband. Loretta set down her knife. What about Dalton? I made some calls. Dalton Reed worked for the outlaws as a gun mule, low level, supposed to transport $50,000 worth of stolen military weapons from a National Guard armory to a buyer in Nevada. Got pulled over for a broken taillight before he could deliver. Cops found the guns. I know all this. What you don't know is that Decker Thornton, the outlaw's president, personally fronted the money for those guns. When Dalton got arrested, Decker lost $50,000 plus the profit he would have made. In his mind, Maggie inherited that debt when she married Dalton. Loretta felt sick. Maggie reported Dalton to the police. That's why he got pulled over. She was trying to protect herself. I know. She did the right thing. But Decker doesn't care about right. He cares about money and respect. And he thinks your daughter owes him both. What are you going to do? Marcus pulled out his wallet, extracted a cashier's check, $50,000. Loretta's hands flew to her mouth. Marcus, no. I sold the north section of the ranch, 50 acres. Been meaning to anyway. Too much land for one person. This covers Maggie's debt, plus interest. We can't accept this. You're not accepting it. I'm buying peace. He looked at her steadily. I told you nobody touches you. I meant it. This is how I keep that promise. You're selling your land for us, for people you've known 1 week. Margaret and I bought 200 acres. We were going to fill it with horses, maybe some cattle, definitely kids running around. None of that happened. What's the point of land if you're alone on it? He pressed the check into her hand. Let me do this. Loretta looked at this man who'd lost everything and was somehow finding the strength to protect strangers. This broken, beautiful man who hid his enormous heart behind leather and scars. You're a good man, Marcus Garrison. I'm a killer and a criminal, but I try to have a code. Your code is better than most people's religion. He almost smiled. Almost. At 7:30, Marcus put on his vest, checked his weapons one final time, and walked to his motorcycle. Wrench was waiting on his own bike, armed and grim. Loretta stood on the porch with Maggie and Clementine. The little girl waved. Bye, Mr. Marcus. Come back soon. Marcus looked at the three of them, his family in every way that mattered except blood. I'll be back for dinner, he promised. Then he kicked the engine to life, and the two motorcycles roared into the gathering darkness. The Old Road Bar sat 20 miles outside Phoenix, a roadhouse that had been neutral territory since the 50s. Wood frame, neon beer signs, gravel parking lot. The kind of place where deals got made and grudges got settled, and everyone understood the rules. Marcus and Wrench arrived at 7:50, 10 minutes early. Good tactics. Decker Thornton was already there, sitting at the bar, bourbon in hand, flanked by 4 outlaws including the 2 who'd harassed Maggie. The man himself was 52, lean and dangerous, with eyes that evaluated everything in terms of profit and loss. He smiled when Marcus walked in. Not a friendly smile, the smile of a shark that had cornered prey. Garrison, wasn't sure you'd show. I said I would. Marcus sat 2 stools away. Wrench positioned himself near the door, hand near his waistband. Let's talk. Let's. You got my message about the gun operation? I did. Answer's still no. Decker's smile didn't waver. See, that's where we have a problem. Hell's Angels have roots, contacts, legitimacy. Outlaws need those things. We could partner. 50-50 split makes serious money. I don't touch guns. Club policy has been for 20 years. Club policy can change. Not this one. Decker sipped his bourbon. What about the other matter? The debt Maggie Wilson owes. Marcus pulled out the cashier's check, set it on the bar. $50,000. Covers Dalton Reed's debt plus 5 years interest. We're square. Decker looked at the check, then at Marcus. Then he started laughing. You're selling your land for some widow's daughter? Garrison, you've gone soft. I've paid the debt. Maggie's clear. That's the end of it. See, that's where you're wrong. Decker leaned in, voice dropping. This stopped being about money when you disrespected me. I made you an offer, a generous offer, and you said no. Then you threatened my men. Then you decided you're some kind of white knight for 2 women who mean nothing. Marcus's voice went cold. They mean something to me. That's your problem. In this life, caring about people makes you weak, makes you vulnerable. Decker smiled. Makes you easy to manipulate. The threat was clear. Crystal. Marcus stood slowly. 6'2", 220, radiating controlled violence. You touch them, and I'll burn everything you own to the ground. Big talk from one man. I'm not one man. I'm president of a Hells Angels chapter. You make a move on my people, and you're at war with the entire organization. Every chapter from here to Oakland will put you in the ground. Ask yourself if 70 grand is worth that. Decker's smile faded. He'd forgotten, momentarily, what Marcus represented. Not just himself, an organization, a brotherhood that had been fighting and surviving since before either of them were born. This isn't over, Decker said. Yes, it is. You take the money, you leave Maggie alone, you stop pushing the gun operation, and we all go back to our corners. Or you push, and you find out what happens when you threaten a Hells Angels family. Marcus dropped the check on the bar and walked out. Wrench followed, hands still near his gun, eyes on the outlaws. They made it to their bikes, started them, got halfway down the road before Wrench spoke over the helmet comms. Boss, that went too easy. I know. He's planning something. I know that too. They rode back to the ranch in silence, both men understanding that the storm was coming. The only question was when. Marcus pulled into his driveway at 9:15. Loretta was waiting on the porch, arms crossed, looking like a mother hen ready to fight wolves. He dismounted, walked up the steps, let her see that he was whole and unharmed. Dinner's cold, she said. I'll eat it anyway. Did it work? Don't know yet. Paid the debt. Made it clear what happens if they push. Now we wait. Loretta nodded. She'd been a military wife long enough to understand that sometimes waiting was all you could do. Inside, she reheated pot roast while Marcus sat at the table, suddenly exhausted. The weight of responsibility, of protecting people who depended on him, of navigating violence without becoming consumed by it, crashed down all at once. You're doing the right thing, Loretta said quietly, setting the plate in front of him. Doesn't always feel right. The right thing rarely does. He ate. She sat across from him, nursing cold coffee, keeping him company. Tell me about Margaret, she said. Not the sad parts, the good parts. Marcus looked surprised, then thoughtful. Then slowly, he started talking. About meeting her in a VA hospital in 1992, both of them damaged in different ways. About her laugh, which sounded like wind chimes. About the way she'd made this ranch into a home with nothing but paint and determination and love. About Sunday mornings reading the paper together. About the small, unremarkable moments that made a marriage. Loretta listened, didn't interrupt, let him remember. When he finally wound down, he looked at her with something like gratitude. Thank you, he said. For what? For asking. Everyone else wants me to forget. You're the first person who understood that remembering is how I keep her alive. I remember my Caleb every day, the good and the bad. That's what love is, carrying someone even after they're gone. They sat in the quiet kitchen, two widowed souls finding comfort in shared grief. Outside, the desert stars burned cold and distant. And somewhere in Phoenix, Decker Thornton made a phone call to his brother in El Paso. The storm was gathering. Sunday morning, Marcus woke to the smell of cinnamon rolls. He stumbled into the kitchen, still half asleep, and found Loretta pulling a pan of homemade rolls from the oven. Golden, perfect, dripping with frosting. It's Sunday, she said. Day of rest and sugar. Marcus stared at the rolls like they were a miracle. Margaret used to make these every Sunday. I know, you told me last night. Loretta smiled. Thought you might want to remember the good parts. Clementine burst through the door, Maggie trailing behind apologetically. Mr. Marcus, Grandma made cinnamon rolls. Can I have one? Please, please, please. Marcus looked at this little girl, who'd somehow wormed her way into his armored heart. Then at Maggie, nervous and hopeful. Then at Loretta, who'd taken his broken house and made it feel like home again. "Yeah," he said, voice rough. "Yeah, you can have one." They ate together, all four of them at Marcus's kitchen table. Clementine chattered about everything and nothing. Maggie slowly relaxed. Loretta watched Marcus with knowing eyes. This was healing. This was hope. This was what Margaret had wanted for him. After breakfast, Clementine asked if she could see the motorcycles. Marcus, unable to deny her anything, led her to the garage. He lifted her onto the seat of his Road King, put his helmet on her head, enormous and ridiculous. She giggled, the sound echoing in the garage like music. "Am I a biker now?" she asked. "Not till you're 30, Marcus said. Same answer as always. "That's so far away." "Good things are worth waiting for." Maggie snapped a photo with her phone. Marcus and Clementine, the massive biker and the tiny girl, both grinning. Later, Loretta would look at that photo and think, this is when we became a family, this exact moment. But the universe has a cruel sense of timing. At 2 p.m., Marcus's phone rang. Sheriff Boone Calloway. "Marcus, we got a problem. Decker Thornton was arrested last night. FBI raid. Gun trafficking, racketeering, attempted murder. They've been building a case for months." Marcus felt ice in his veins. "What does that mean for me?" "Means you're clear. You're meeting with him?" FBI had the place wired. They heard everything. You offering to pay the debt, you refusing the gun operation, you threatening to defend your people. It's all on tape. Far as they're concerned, you're a witness, not a suspect. That's good news, Boone. There's more. Decker has a brother, Cage Thornton, former Army Ranger, dishonorably discharged, worked as a mercenary in Mexico. He's been in El Paso maximum security for the past 3 years. Killed 2 rival cartel members in a bar fight. "Why are you telling me this?" Boone's voice went grim. "Because he escaped last night. Killed 2 guards, walked out like smoke. FBI thinks Decker might have arranged it before the arrest." Marcus's blood ran cold. "Where is he?" "Unknown. But Marcus, this guy isn't like Decker. Decker's a businessman who uses violence as a tool. Cage is violence, pure and simple. 17 confirmed kills in Mexico. Tortured an informant for 3 days before killing him. He's a psychopath with Ranger training and nothing to lose. He'll come for me. He'll come for what you care about. That's how he operates. Makes you watch while he destroys everything, then kills you last." Marcus looked through the window, saw Loretta hanging laundry, saw Maggie reading on the porch, saw Clementine playing with a stick, lost in imagination. His family, his responsibility, his to protect. "Boone, I need you to take them. The 3 of them. Put them somewhere safe." "I can do that. But Marcus, do it now, today. I'll handle Cage." "You can't handle him alone." "I won't be alone. I've got 20 brothers who'll die before they let him touch what's mine." He hung up, walked outside, called Loretta over. Her smile died when she saw his face. "What happened?" "Pack a bag. You, Maggie, and Clementine. You're leaving. Now." "Marcus, the man I told you about, Decker's brother, he escaped prison. He's coming here, and I can't protect you if you're here." Maggie had come over, hearing the urgency. "Where are we going?" "Sheriff Calloway's ranch, 40 miles north. Secure. He's ex-Marines, same as me. He'll keep you safe." Loretta's eyes filled with tears. Not fear, anger. "We just got here. We just started feeling like we belonged. And you'll come back. When this is over, I promise." "What if you don't survive this?" Marcus took her hands. Rough, calloused hands that had cooked for him, cared for him, brought him back to life. "I've survived worse. I survived war. I survived losing Margaret. I'll survive this. But I can't do it if I'm worrying about you. Let us stay. Let us help. You help by being alive. by being safe, by giving me a reason to come back. Clementine appeared, sensing the tension. "Mr. Marcus, are you sad?" He knelt down to her level. This little girl who called him her friend, who made him remember what joy felt like. "I have to go away for a little while," he said gently. "You and your mama and grandma are going to stay with a friend of mine. He's a good man. He'll take care of you. Will you come visit?" "As soon as I can." "Promise?" Marcus looked into her innocent eyes and made a promise he prayed he could keep. "Promise." 30 minutes later, they were packed. 30 minutes after that, Boone arrived in an unmarked truck. 30 minutes after that, Loretta and Maggie and Clementine were driving away from Red Canyon Ranch, leaving Marcus standing in the driveway, alone. He watched until the dust settled. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. "Wrench, call church. Emergency. Everyone who can carry a weapon. We're going to war." Within an hour, 23 Hells Angels filled Marcus's ranch house. Armed, grim, ready. Marcus stood before them, president and father and general all at once. "Cage Thornton is coming. He's a trained killer with nothing to lose and a grudge against me. He'll hit us hard, hit us fast, and try to break us before we can respond. So we're going to make this place a fortress. We're going to turn my ranch into a killing field. And when he comes, we're going to show him what happens when you threaten a Hells Angels family." Wrench stepped forward. "What do you need, boss?" Marcus smiled, cold, dangerous. The smile of a man who'd been to war and learned its lessons well. "I need weapons, ammunition, and eyes on every approach. I need shifts, perimeter security, and fallback positions. I need tripwires, cameras, and a plan for if things go south." He looked at each man. "But most of all, I need brothers. And I've got 23 of them." The men roared approval. They worked through the night, turned the ranch into a defensive position that would have made their military trainers proud. Motion sensors on the access road, cameras covering blind spots, weapons stashed in strategic locations, fallback positions if the main house was breached. Marcus walked the perimeter at 2 a.m., checking everything personally. Wrench joined him. "Boss, you really think he'll come?" "I know he will. Men like Cage don't forgive, don't forget, and they definitely don't stop until they're stopped permanently." "Then we'll stop him," Marcus nodded. But his mind was 40 miles north, with a widow and her daughter, and a little girl who thought he was a superhero. He'd promised to come back. He'd promised to keep them safe. And Marcus Garrison always kept his word, even if it killed him. The desert night stretched on, cold and clear. Stars burned overhead, indifferent to human violence. Somewhere out there, a killer was coming. But here on this ranch, 23 men waited, brothers in arms, ready to die for their president, ready to kill for his family. The storm was coming. They would weather it together, or they would die trying. The attack came on the third night. Marcus had learned patience in the Marines, learned that waiting was its own form of warfare, that anticipation could be as deadly as bullets. For 72 hours, he and his brothers held the ranch, rotating shifts, staying sharp, waiting for Cage Thornton to make his move. The waiting was torture. Every hour that passed was an hour away from Loretta's cooking, from Maggie's quiet presence, from Clementine's laughter. Every hour was a reminder of what he stood to lose. Marcus called Sheriff Calloway twice a day for updates. The answer was always the same. They're safe, they're scared, they want to come home. "Tell them soon," Marcus would say. "Tell them I'm working on it." But soon was a promise he wasn't sure he could keep. Tuesday night, 3 a.m., the motion sensors triggered. Marcus was awake instantly, years of military training overriding the need for sleep. He keyed the radio. "Wrench, you see it?" Affirmative, single vehicle, no lights, moving slow on the access road, about 2 miles out. "Wake everyone, battle positions." The ranch transformed. Men materialized from shadows, weapons ready, eyes hard. They drilled this scenario 100 times over 3 days. Now it was real. Marcus took position on the second floor of the main house, sniper rifle resting on a windowsill. From here, he could see the entire approach. The desert was black, but the moon was 3/4 full, bright enough to cast shadows. The vehicle stopped half a mile out. Lights off, engine killed, then nothing. 5 minutes passed, 10, 15. "Boss?" Wrench's voice crackled over the radio. "This feels wrong." Marcus agreed. Cage Thornton was military trained. He wouldn't announce his approach with a vehicle and then just stop. This was a distraction. "Everyone check your sectors," Marcus ordered. "This is a diversion. He's coming from somewhere else." The words were barely out of his mouth when the garage exploded. The blast lit up the night like a miniature sun. Marcus felt the shock wave through the house, heard glass shattering, men shouting. His beautiful motorcycles, his tools, everything he'd built with his own hands, consumed by fire in seconds. But he didn't have time to mourn, because the explosion was just the opening move. Gunfire erupted from 3 directions simultaneously. Muzzle flashes in the darkness, the distinctive crack of AR-15s, the deeper boom of shotguns. Cage had brought an army. "Return fire! Don't let them advance!" Marcus shouted into the radio. His brothers responded. 23 men who trained together, fought together, would die together if necessary. The night became a symphony of violence. Bullets tore through wood and metal. Men screamed. Blood sprayed. Marcus picked his targets carefully. A muzzle flash in the scrub brush, 200 yards out. He exhaled, squeezed the trigger, and the flash stopped. Another target, firing from behind a rock formation. Adjust for wind and distance. Fire. The figure dropped. But for every man they put down, 2 more seemed to appear. Cage had recruited well. Outlaws, mercenaries, anyone willing to kill for money. Marcus counted at least 15 attackers, maybe more. The math was bad. 23 defenders against 15 attackers should favor the defenders, but Cage had surprise, superior positioning, and professional training. This wasn't a bar fight. This was war. "Boss!" Jesse's voice, young and terrified, crackled over the radio. "They're flanking the west side. We can't hold. Fall back to the house. Everyone, fall back now." The order was bitter ash in Marcus's mouth. Giving up ground, retreating, went against every instinct. But tactics beat bravado. Better to consolidate in the reinforced main house than die in the open. His brothers retreated in good order, providing covering fire for each other, moving in pairs like they'd been taught. Professional, disciplined, but the attackers pressed hard, and Marcus saw 2 of his men go down. Hank took a round in the leg, screaming but still firing. Bear grabbed him, hauled him toward the house, took a bullet in the shoulder for his trouble but kept moving. Brothers taking care of brothers. They made it inside, barricaded the doors, took positions at windows. 14 men now, down from 23. Some wounded, all exhausted, but still fighting. The attackers surrounded the house. Then, silence. The gunfire stopped, just the crackle of the burning garage and the ragged breathing of wounded men. Marcus knew what came next. He'd seen this play before, in Fallujah, in dozens of tactical scenarios. The enemy would try to negotiate, try to make him think there was a way out that didn't involve bullets. Right on cue, a voice called out, deep, controlled, laced with amusement. "Marcus Garrison, I'm impressed. You've got discipline, you've got tactics, but you don't have a way out." Cage Thornton. Had to be. Marcus moved to a window, staying in shadow. "What do you want, Cage?" "Want? Brother, I want everything you took from me. You got my brother arrested. You disrespected my family. You thought you could hide behind your patch and your reputation. Your brother made his choices. I just protected my people." Cage laughed. The sound was wrong, too much enjoyment in it. Your people? You mean the widow? The single mom? The little girl? A pause, cruel and calculated. I know where they are, Marcus. I know Sheriff Calloway's ranch. Know it real well. Used to hunt that land when I was a kid. Marcus's blood turned to ice. You're lying. Am I? Want to bet their lives on it? Marcus pulled out his phone with shaking hands, called Boone Calloway. It rang, and rang, and rang. No answer. He tried again. Same result. Oh, you're starting to understand now, Cage called out. Here's the deal, Marcus. You walk out, unarmed, hands up, and I'll call off my boys at Calloway's place. You stay in there, and I send the order to kill everyone, starting with the little girl. Wrench grabbed Marcus's arm. Boss, it's a bluff. He's trying to break you. Marcus wanted to believe that, but the phone in his hand stayed silent. Boone always answered. Always. Unless he couldn't. You've got 60 seconds to decide, Garrison. 60 seconds before I make a phone call that ends 3 lives. Marcus looked around the room, at his brothers, bleeding and exhausted but ready to fight, at the windows where muzzle flashes indicated at least a dozen attackers still outside, at his phone, silent and terrible. He thought about Loretta, her strength, her kindness, the way she'd brought light back into his darkness. He thought about Maggie, fragile but fierce, fighting to build a life for her daughter. He thought about Clementine, 5 years old, still believed in heroes. They believed he was a hero, believed he'd protect them. And Marcus Garrison always kept his word. I'm coming out, he called. Boss, no! Wrench grabbed him. It's suicide. He's got them, or he will. I can't take that chance. Then we all go out. We fight together. Marcus shook his head, placed his hand on Wrench's shoulder. This man who'd stood beside him for 15 years. His brother in every way that mattered. You live through this. You rebuild. You tell them I tried. His voice broke. You tell Loretta I kept my promise. Before Wrench could stop him, Marcus stripped off his weapons, set down his rifle, his pistol, his knife, walked to the door. Marcus, don't! Jesse shouted, but Marcus opened the door and stepped into the firelight. He walked forward, hands raised, expecting a bullet at any second. The attackers emerged from cover, weapons trained on him. 15 men, hard-faced and mercenary, and at their center, Cage Thornton. 6'4", built like a tank, scarred face that had seen too much violence and enjoyed every second. Eyes that held no light, no humanity, nothing but cold calculation and sadistic pleasure. A monster wearing human skin. The legend himself, Cage said, circling Marcus like a predator. Marcus Steele Garrison, war hero, Hell's Angels president, protector of widows and orphans. He laughed. Just a man, just meat. Let them go, Marcus said. You've got me. That's what you wanted. Oh, I'll let them go. Eventually. After I'm done. Cage pulled out a phone, showed Marcus the screen. A text message ready to send. Kill them all. Call your boys at Calloway's ranch, Marcus said, voice steady despite the terror eating him alive. Call them off. Now. Cage smiled. Then deliberately, he deleted the message. There are no boys at Calloway's ranch, Marcus. That was a bluff. A psychological operation. Rangers taught me well. He leaned in close. But you believed it. You surrendered for them. Gave up everything for 3 people you've known. What, 6 months? The relief was so intense, Marcus nearly collapsed. They were safe. Loretta, Maggie, Clementine, they were safe. You're a fool, Cage continued. A sentimental fool. That's why I'm going to enjoy this. He pulled back his fist and drove it into Marcus's stomach. The pain was extraordinary. Marcus doubled over, gasping, tasting blood. He'd been hit before, countless times, but Cage hit like he'd been trained to kill with his bare hands. because he had been. Another punch, this one to the face. Marcus's world exploded in stars and agony. He went down to his knees. Inside the house, he heard his brothers shouting, preparing to rush out. "No!" Marcus roared, voice raw. "Stay inside! That's an order!" Cage kicked him in the ribs. Something cracked. "Giving orders? Still playing president? You're done, Garrison. Your club is done. I'm going to kill you, then kill every one of your brothers, then find those women you care about and show them what happens to people protected by a dead man." Marcus looked up through blood and pain, met Cage's eyes, and smiled. "You made a mistake," he said. "What mistake?" "You let me get close enough." Marcus's hands shot out, grabbed Cage's ankle, and twisted with every ounce of strength in his 58-year-old body. Cage went down, surprised. Marcus was on him instantly, forgetting pain, forgetting age, becoming the Marine who'd survived Fallujah and the biker who'd survived 3 decades of war. They grappled. Cage was younger, stronger, better trained. But Marcus was fighting for more than survival. He was fighting for family, for home, for 3 people who'd given him a reason to live again. That made him dangerous. He got his hands around Cage's throat, squeezed, felt cartilage compress, saw Cage's eyes widen with the first real fear he'd probably felt in years. Then gunfire erupted, but not from Cage's men, from the access road, from the desert, from everywhere. Vehicles roared into the compound, motorcycles, trucks, dozens of them. Hell's Angels, not just the Phoenix chapter, chapters from Tucson, Flagstaff, Albuquerque, every club within 300 miles responding to Wrench's call for backup. Over 100 bikers descended on Red Canyon Ranch like the wrath of God. Cage's mercenaries, outnumbered 5 to 1, broke and ran. Some were caught, some weren't. In the chaos, Marcus lost his grip on Cage. The former ranger rolled away, came up with a pistol, aimed at Marcus's head. The shot rang out, but it wasn't Cage's gun. Cage looked down at the red stain spreading across his chest, looked behind Marcus. His face showed something like surprise. Marcus turned. Sheriff Boone Calloway stood 30 feet away, rifle still raised, face grim. Behind him, 3 more sheriff's deputies and 2 FBI agents. "Federal agents!" one of the FBI agents shouted. "Everyone on the ground, now!" Cage swayed, tried to raise his gun. Boone shot him again. This time Cage went down and stayed down. It was over. The cleanup took hours. FBI took statements, arrested the surviving mercenaries, documented the scene. The garage was a total loss. The house was shot to hell. 2 of Marcus's brothers were dead, 5 more seriously wounded, but they'd won. Dawn broke over Red Canyon Ranch, harsh and beautiful and unforgiving. Marcus sat on what was left of his porch, wrapped in a blanket someone had given him, ribs taped, face swollen, alive. Boone sat beside him. "Sorry I didn't answer your calls. FBI had us in a communications blackout. They'd been tracking Cage since the escape, knew he'd come for you, used you as bait. They could have told me. Would you have played along if you'd known?" Marcus thought about that. About 3 days of terror. About surrendering to save people who weren't even in danger. About Cage's psychological warfare. "No," he admitted. "I would have fought different, maybe gotten people killed." "That's why they didn't tell you." Boone stood. "By the way, there's someone here to see you." Marcus looked up. Loretta stood at the edge of the driveway, Maggie beside her, Clementine holding both their hands. They defied Boone's orders to stay put, driven through the night to get here. Come home. Marcus tried to stand. His ribs screamed. He made it anyway. Loretta crossed the distance between them in seconds. This 65-year-old woman who'd buried one husband and wasn't about to watch another man destroy himself. She didn't ask if he was okay, didn't waste time with meaningless questions. just wrapped her arms around him, gentle with his injuries, fierce with her relief. "You stubborn, stupid, wonderful man," she whispered. "Don't you ever scare me like that again." Marcus held her. This woman who'd walked into his life 6 months ago and somehow become essential as breathing. "I promised I'd come back," he said, "and you kept it. You always keep your word." Maggie approached, Clementine still holding her hand. The little girl looked at Marcus with wide, serious eyes. "Mr. Marcus, you're all hurt." "I'm okay, sweetheart. Were you protecting us?" Marcus knelt down, ignoring the agony in his ribs. Looked this 5-year-old girl in the eyes. "Yeah, I was protecting you." "Thank you." She threw her arms around his neck. "You're the best superhero ever." And Marcus Steele Garrison, president of the Hells Angels Phoenix chapter, veteran of Desert Storm, the hardest man most people would ever meet, broke down and cried. Not from pain, not from exhaustion, but from the overwhelming realization that he'd found something worth protecting, something worth living for, a family. The next 3 months were reconstruction in every sense. The garage was rebuilt, better than before, fireproof, with enough space for 30 motorcycles instead of 20. The brothers who died defending the ranch got memorial plaques on the wall. Hank Thompson and Clay Jefferson, heroes. The main house was repaired, new windows, reinforced doors, fresh paint. Loretta insisted on being involved in every decision about the kitchen. "If I'm cooking in it, I get a say," she declared, and Marcus hadn't argued. The cottage got an addition, another bedroom for when Clementine got older, a workshop where Maggie could pursue her new interest in woodworking, something Marcus had started teaching her as therapy for the trauma. The ranch, broken by violence, was healing. So was Marcus. Physical healing came first. Broken ribs, concussion, internal bruising. All treatable, all temporary. He followed Loretta's orders like a good patient, took his medications, rested when she told him to rest. The emotional healing took longer. He had nightmares, woke up gasping, reaching for weapons that weren't there, fighting enemies who'd already been defeated. Loretta would hear him from the cottage and come over, sit with him, talk him down, remind him that it was over, that everyone was safe, that he'd won. "You're allowed to be broken," she'd tell him. "You don't have to be Steele all the time." Slowly, he learned to believe her. Maggie's divorce from Dalton was finalized in August. The judge, hearing about the attempted attack by the outlaws and Dalton's role in creating the debt, granted full custody to Maggie and issued a permanent restraining order. Dalton would serve his full sentence with no possibility of parole. Maggie cried when the papers came through, not from sadness, from relief, from the knowledge that she was finally, truly free. Marcus had been there when she got the news. He'd driven her to the courthouse, waited outside, been there when she emerged. "It's over," she'd said, disbelieving. "It's over," Marcus confirmed. "You're safe. Clem's safe. And anyone who tries to change that goes through me." She'd hugged him. This dangerous man who'd become her protector, her friend, something like a father figure. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." Marcus had cleared his throat, uncomfortable with gratitude as always. "Your family, that's what family does." Family, the word that had terrified him 6 months ago. Now it was his foundation. September brought changes to the Hells Angels chapter. Marcus stepped down as president, not from weakness, from wisdom. He'd given 35 years to the club. It was time to let the next generation lead. Wrench took over. Good choice, smart, tactical, loyal. The chapter was in capable hands. Marcus became a road captain. Less administrative work, more mentorship, more time for the things that mattered, more time for family. Sunday dinners became tradition. Every week, without fail, the main house filled with people. Hells Angels brothers and their families, neighbors, Sheriff Boone and his wife, anyone who needed a meal and community. Loretta cooked. She always cooked. Pot roast, fried chicken, barbecue ribs, whatever caught her fancy. The kitchen that had sat empty for 3 years now produced enough food to feed 40 people regularly. And Marcus, who'd eaten alone for so long he'd forgotten what conversation sounded like, sat at the head of the table and felt something he hadn't felt since Margaret died. Joy. October brought Clementine's 6th birthday. Loretta wanted to have a party at the ranch. Marcus insisted on helping. They decorated the barn. Streamers, balloons, a banner that read, "Happy Birthday, Clementine," in letters Marcus had painted himself. They invited her whole kindergarten class. 20 kids running around the ranch, screaming and laughing and making chaos. Marcus loved every second. He taught them about motorcycles, letting them sit on his Road King one at a time, making engine noises while they pretended to ride. He showed them how to rope fence posts, how to identify desert plants, how to be respectful of the land. The other parents watched this massive, scarred biker with initial suspicion that gradually transformed into appreciation. He was good with kids, patient, kind. The contrast between his appearance and his demeanor was striking. At the end of the party, as parents were picking up their children, one mother approached Marcus. "Thank you for this. Clementine talks about you all the time. Mr. Marcus this, Mr. Marcus that. She adores you." Marcus felt his throat tighten. "She's a special kid. She's lucky to have you in her life." After everyone left, after the decorations came down and the barn was cleaned, Marcus found Clementine in the garage. She was sitting on his motorcycle, helmet on, making vroom vroom noises. "Having fun?" he asked. She turned, smiled wide. "Best birthday ever. Thank you, Mr. Marcus." "You're welcome, sweetheart." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Mr. Marcus, can I ask you something?" "Anything." "My friend Emma has a grandpa, and my friend Jackson has a grandpa. But I don't have a grandpa because Mama's daddy died before I was born." She looked at him with those serious 6-year-old eyes. "Could you be my grandpa?" The world stopped. Marcus felt like he'd been hit harder than any punch Cage had landed. "Clem, His voice broke. "You'd want that? Want an old biker for a grandpa?" "You're not old. You're perfect. You teach me stuff and you make Grandma Loretta smile and you keep us safe." She bounced excitedly. "Please, can you be my grandpa?" Marcus looked at this little girl who'd wandered into his life and stolen his heart without even trying. Thought about Margaret, who would have loved her. Thought about the empty years after Margaret died. Thought about how this child had helped him remember how to live. "Yeah," he said, voice thick with emotion. "Yeah, I can be your grandpa." Clementine threw herself at him, hugging him tight. "Yay! I have a grandpa now." Marcus held her, this tiny person who'd given him a title more precious than president, more valuable than any patch or rank. Grandpa. He looked up. Loretta stood in the doorway, tears streaming down her face, smiling. She'd heard everything. That night, after Clementine was asleep, after Maggie had gone to the cottage, Loretta and Marcus sat on the porch under the stars. "She asked me if you were her grandpa," Loretta said. "I didn't know what to tell her. I said yes." "I heard." "Marcus, are you sure? That's a big commitment. She'll expect you to be there for birthdays, graduations, weddings someday." Marcus looked at this woman who'd saved him from himself, who'd walked into his broken life with nothing but courage and a gift for cooking and somehow put him back together. "I'm sure. I want to be there for all of it. Want to be the grandpa who teaches her to ride, who scares off bad boyfriends, who walks her down the aisle if her mama lets me." He paused. "I want to be part of this family. Officially." Loretta's breath caught. "What are you saying?" Marcus stood, reached into his pocket, pulled out a small box. Inside was a ring. Not elaborate, a simple gold band with a small diamond. The kind a working man could afford. The kind that meant commitment and promise and forever. "I'm saying I don't want to be alone anymore. I'm saying you brought light back into my darkness. I'm saying I love you, Loretta Wilson, and I want to spend whatever years I have left making you happy. He opened the box. Will you marry me? Loretta looked at the ring, at this man who'd lost everything and somehow found the courage to risk his heart again, at the life they'd built together from ashes and hope. Yes, she said. Yes, Marcus, I'll marry you. He slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, like it had been waiting for her all along. They kissed under the Arizona stars, two people who'd both loved and lost and found each other when they'd stopped looking. Second chances, grace, redemption, love that survived fire and blood and came out stronger. The wedding happened in November, exactly 1 year after that first dinner. Nothing fancy, just friends and family in the barn Marcus had rebuilt. Sheriff Boone officiated. Wrench was best man. Maggie was maid of honor. Clementine was flower girl, taking her job very seriously. Over 100 people attended. Hell's Angels from 5 chapters, neighbors, old friends, even some of the parents from Clementine's birthday party. The FBI agents who'd helped take down Cage sent a card and a gift. To the man who helped us catch a monster, congratulations on finding happiness. Marcus wore a suit, looked uncomfortable as hell in it, but Loretta had insisted, and he'd learned that happy wife meant happy life. Loretta wore a simple white dress, nothing elaborate. She was 66 years old, and this was her second marriage. But she was beautiful, radiant, happy in a way she hadn't been since Caleb died. The vows were traditional: love, honor, cherish, in sickness and health, till death do us part. Marcus meant every word. When Boone said, "You may kiss the bride," the crowd erupted in cheers and motorcycle engines revving, and Marcus kissed his wife while their families celebrated around them. The reception was legendary. Loretta had cooked for 3 days straight with help from Maggie and a dozen other women. Barbecue, side dishes, 3 different kinds of pie, enough food to feed an army. Music played, people danced. Stories were told about Margaret and Caleb, honoring the past while celebrating the future. Late in the evening, Marcus found himself sitting with Boone, both men nursing beers, watching the celebration. "Never thought I'd see you smile again," Boone said. "After Margaret, you were gone, brother, just going through the motions." "I was. Loretta brought me back." "She's good for you. They all are, the whole family." Marcus nodded, watched Loretta dancing with Clementine, both of them laughing, watched Maggie talking with Wrench, finally comfortable around the club members, watched his brothers celebrating, alive and whole and happy. "I spent 3 years trying to die," Marcus said quietly, "picked fights I shouldn't have won, took risks no sane man would take. Part of me wanted to follow Margaret wherever she went." "What changed?" "Loretta knocked on my door looking for a job, and somehow feeding me turned into saving me." He smiled. "Funny how that works." "Not funny. Grace. You just had to be open to receiving it." Marcus thought about that, about grace, about second chances, about how the hardest man he knew had been brought to his knees by an elderly widow with a gift for cooking and a heart big enough to love a broken biker. "Yeah," he said, "grace." The party lasted until midnight. When it finally wound down, when the guests had gone home and the barn was cleaned and Maggie had taken an exhausted Clementine to bed, Marcus and Loretta stood alone in their house. Their house, not his, theirs. "Happy?" Loretta asked. Marcus pulled her close. This woman who'd given him everything: family, purpose, hope, love. "Happy doesn't begin to cover it," he said. They went to bed in the room Marcus had once shared with Margaret. He'd been nervous about that, worried about ghosts. But Loretta had understood. "She was your first love," Loretta had said. "I'm your second chance. There's room for both in your heart." And she was right. Margaret would have liked Loretta, would have approved of this match, would have wanted Marcus to find happiness again. He felt her blessing like a whisper in the darkness. Sleep well, my love. You did good. 2 years later, Marcus Garrison stood in the kitchen of Red Canyon Ranch, making breakfast. Scrambled eggs, bacon, toast. Nothing fancy, but made with love. The house was full. Loretta setting the table, Maggie feeding 9-month-old baby David, her son from a new relationship with a good man named Frank, who worked construction and treated her like a queen. Clementine, now 8 years old, doing homework at the kitchen counter, and in the high chair Marcus had built himself, 11-month-old Emma. Named after Margaret Emma Garrison, his and Loretta's daughter. Adopted. A baby girl whose teenage mother couldn't care for her. A baby the state was going to put into foster care until Marcus and Loretta stepped forward. "We're too old," Loretta had protested when Marcus first suggested it. "We're experienced," Marcus had countered. "We've got love to give. We've got room. We've got family who'll help raise her." It had taken 6 months of paperwork, interviews, home studies, but finally the judge had signed the papers. Emma Garrison, their daughter. Marcus looked at this baby girl who would never remember anyone but him as her father. This second chance at fatherhood he'd never expected. She smiled at him, all gums and joy, and his heart melted. "Someone's hungry," Loretta said, taking Emma from the high chair. She settled into a chair, began feeding the baby, natural as breathing. This was their life now. Chaos and noise and love and family. The ranch had become more than a home. It was a refuge. Marcus and Loretta had quietly spread the word through social services that they had space, resources, and hearts willing to help. Over the past 2 years, they'd housed 3 women escaping domestic violence, 2 veterans struggling with PTSD, and a teenage boy whose parents had kicked him out for being gay. Some stayed weeks, some stayed months, all left knowing they were valued, protected, loved. The Hells Angels helped, provided security, fixed cars, offered jobs, became uncles and brothers and father figures to people who needed them. The ranch that had once been a fortress became a sanctuary. Marcus's phone rang. "Wrench. Boss, we've got a situation. Woman showed up at the clubhouse, 2 kids, running from her ex-husband. Says he's threatened to kill her. She needs somewhere safe." Marcus didn't hesitate. "Bring her to the ranch. We've got room." "You sure? You've already got a full house." Marcus looked around his kitchen, at Loretta feeding their daughter, at Maggie and her son, at Clementine doing homework, at the family he'd built from ashes and hope. "We'll make room. We always do." An hour later, a terrified woman named Sarah and her 2 children sat at Marcus's table, eating Loretta's cooking, slowly starting to believe they might be safe. Marcus watched from the doorway, felt Loretta's hand slip into his. "You're a good man, Marcus Garrison," she whispered. "I'm trying to be. You're succeeding." That night, after everyone was asleep, Marcus stood on his porch under the stars. The ranch was quiet, peaceful, full of people who'd found their way home. He thought about the journey, about losing Margaret and wanting to die, about Loretta showing up with nothing but pride and desperation and a gift for cooking, about Cage Thornton and the fire and the blood and the victory, about choosing to live instead of just survive. His phone buzzed. Text from Boone Calloway. "Heard you took in another family. You running a bed and breakfast now?" Marcus smiled, typed back, "Running a home. There's a difference." Boone's response came quick. Margaret would be proud. Marcus looked up at the stars, felt something like peace settle over him. "Yeah," he thought, "I think she would be." Inside, Loretta was settling Emma into her crib, singing softly. The old lullaby her grandmother used to sing, the one she'd sung to her own children, the one that made everything feel safe. Marcus joined her, wrapped his arms around his wife. Together they watched their daughter sleep. "Thank you," Marcus whispered. "For what?" "For saving my life, for giving me a family, for teaching me that steel can bend without breaking." Loretta turned in his arms, looked up at this man who'd traveled from darkness into light, who'd chosen love over death, who'd opened his heart wide enough to hold multitudes. You saved yourself, Marcus. I just cooked while you did the hard work. Best cooking I've ever had, she laughed, kissed him, and in that moment, in that house full of people who needed each other, Marcus Garrison understood the truth. He wasn't broken anymore, wasn't alone, wasn't just surviving. He was living, really living, and it was beautiful. The desert wind whispered through the canyon. The stars burned cold and bright. And in a ranch house in Arizona, a family slept safe and warm and loved. Redemption tasted like pot roast and second chances. And Marcus Steele Garrison, former Marine, Hells Angels road captain, husband, father, grandfather, protector of the broken and the lost, finally understood what Margaret had tried to tell him in those final moments. Don't give up. Don't stop living. He hadn't. And God, what a life it had become. The end. Some men are steel and leather and violence, but underneath, where it counts, they're made of love and sacrifice and second chances. Marcus Garrison was all of it. A man who learned that the strongest thing you can do isn't fighting. It's opening your heart wide enough to let people in, even when you're terrified. Especially then. Epilogue. 10 years later, Marcus Garrison stood in the barn of Red Canyon Ranch, surrounded by family. Clementine was 18 now, heading to college on a full scholarship. Maggie's son David was 10, all energy and questions. Emma was 11, following her grandpa everywhere, learning to fix motorcycles and stand up for people who couldn't stand up for themselves. Loretta, 76 years old, still cooked Sunday dinner for 50 people every week, still commanded the kitchen like a general, still made Marcus feel like the luckiest man alive. The ranch had hosted 43 families over the decade, 43 groups of broken people who'd found safety, healing, hope. Some stayed in touch, some disappeared into new lives. All carried the knowledge that someone had cared enough to help. Marcus was 68 now, slower, grayer. His hands shook sometimes from old injuries, but he was happy, truly, deeply happy. The Hells Angels honored him on his retirement. 35 years of service. They gave him a patch that read, "Honored Member, Forever Family." He wore it with pride. At the celebration, Wrench stood to give a speech. Marcus taught me that being strong isn't about how hard you hit. It's about how many times you get back up. It's about protecting people who can't protect themselves. It's about building something that lasts. Wrench raised his glass. To Marcus, the best president we ever had, the best man I've ever known. 100 voices echoed, "To Marcus!" Later, as the sun set over the desert, Marcus sat with Loretta on their porch. Same place they'd sat 1,000 times before. Same peace. Same love. "No regrets?" Loretta asked. Marcus thought about everything. The war, the club, Margaret, Cage, the fire, the rebuilding, the family. "Not one," he said. "You?" "Not one." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars came out, holding hands, growing old together, living the life they'd built from broken pieces and stubborn hope. In the distance, motorcycles rumbled, the next generation taking their ride into the desert night, carrying forward the values Marcus had taught them. Protect the weak, honor your word. Family isn't blood, it's choice. Marcus smiled. His legacy wasn't violence or reputation or fear. It was love. And that was exactly how he wanted to be remembered.